Drive through any Minnesota suburb, and almost every house sits on a full basement. Drive through Houston or Orlando, and you'll find 1 in 100. Same country, same builders, same building code. So why does a line on a map decide whether your house gets a whole floor underground or none at all? Here's what almost everyone gets wrong. It has very little to do with how cold it gets. The real answer is a single line buried in the dirt under your house. And once you understand it, you'll see the northern basement was almost an accident. Today I will show you the 4 forces that actually decide it, why the South isn't being cheap, and the one thing that matters more than any of them when you buy. Ask 10 people why northern houses have basements, and 9 say the same thing. It's cold, so you dig below the freeze. That feels right. It's mostly backwards. A basement, stripped down, isn't a cold weather feature. It's just a deep hole with walls, kept dry. Whether that hole makes sense has almost nothing to do with air temperature and everything to do with 2 things you never see: what the ground is made of and how high the water sits beneath it, which is exactly why the first answer is hiding under the South. Start with Florida because it makes the rule impossible to miss. A basement only works if you keep water out, and in much of Florida, you lose that fight immediately. The water table sits just a few feet down across the state, and in South Florida, only 2 or 3 feet. Picture digging a hole at the beach. Go down a couple of feet, and it fills on its own. That's what a Florida basement is. Holding the water back would take waterproofed walls, perimeter drains, and constant sump pumps, and even then, a hurricane fills it within hours. So the home goes on a concrete slab, which costs roughly $6,000 to $12,000, and sits above the water. The slab isn't the cheap option here. It's the only sane one. But water is only half the South's story. Now go back north, because this is where the real mechanism hides. The building code, IRC section R403.1.4, requires the footing your house sits on to be placed below the frost line. The depth soil freezes in winter. The reason is frost heave. When wet soil freezes, it expands, and a footing sitting in that zone gets lifted, cracking the house from below. So in the north, you have no choice. In Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, and Maine, the frost line runs 42 to 60 inches down, so footings legally start 4 to 5 feet underground. And here's the part nobody mentions. Once an excavator has dug a 5-foot trench around your house and you are pouring concrete walls to that depth, going the rest of the way to a full 8-foot basement is not a separate project. It is a little more digging and concrete on a hole you were forced to dig anyway. That is why a basement runs $20 to $30 a square foot, far cheaper than building that room above ground. The North did not fall in love with basements. The code dug most of the hole, and builders finished it. But the strangest part is not why the South says no. It is that the North never really chose to say yes. That same ground is why the rest of the South stays basement-free, even far from the coast. Texas is the clearest case. Much of the state sits on expansive clay, the stuff locals call black gumbo, and it behaves like a sponge that never settles. When it rains, the clay swells. When it dries, it shrinks and pulls away. Buried basement walls get pressed from every side until they crack, leak, and fail. The same red clay and high water table is why Oklahoma skips basements too. And in the Texas Hill Country, it flips, because bedrock sits so close to the surface that digging means blasting through rock for nothing. So those homes go on slabs, not from laziness, but because a buried box in that soil is a repair bill running into the thousands once the walls move. But none of that explains the twist, because the basement was never actually required, even in the North. And that's the part I've been building to, the fact that rewrites all of it. When I first read it in the code, I had to reread it, because it contradicts the whole idea that it's cold, so you dig. If freezing soil truly forced houses underground, there would be no way around it in a cold climate, but there is. It's called a frost-protected shallow foundation, IRC section R403.3, and it lets a builder in a freezing climate place that footing just 12 to 16 inches down, nowhere near the frost line, as long as they wrap it in rigid foam. The foam traps heat leaking out of your heated house and keeps the soil from ever freezing. No deep dig, no frost heave, no basement. So the cold never mandated a basement at all. The North's basement exists because the code already forced a deep, expensive hole, and finishing it into a room was almost free. The South skips it because there, that hole fills with water or sits in shifting clay. Same physics, opposite math. So if the cold isn't the reason, what is? The honest answer has two parts. First, the thing deciding your foundation was never the thermometer. It was the economics of a hole. In the North, frost heave forces a deep dig, so the basement comes nearly free. In the South, water and clay turn that hole into a permanent fight, so the slab wins. Nobody is being cheated. The ground just hands builders different math. Second, the real risk was never which foundation you got. It was one built against its ground rather than with it. A wet basement up north and a heaving slab down south are not bad luck. They are predictable failure modes, and the foundation that is normal for a region is almost always the one engineered to survive there. So if you are buying in either half of the country, here's what matters. Number 3, up north, treat the basement as the bonus it is, but never assume it is dry just because it is finished. The dig was free. Staying dry is not. Budget for grading, drainage, and a working sump, because that hole is the lowest point water will always find. Number 2, in the South, stop reading no basement as cheap or second rate. A properly built slab or pier and beam home is the climate correct answer, and what should worry you is the rare southern house that does have a basement, because that is the one fighting the water table. Number 1, and almost nobody does this, the smartest money isn't on foundation type at all. It's on the dirt underneath it. Before you buy, get the soil report if one exists, and walk the property to see how it slopes and drains. The brochure tells you about the countertops. The ground tells you about the next 30 years. So here's the rule. A house's foundation isn't chosen by the weather you feel. It's dictated by a line in the dirt you can't see, and the water sitting under it, and the smart buyer reads the ground before the granite. Next time, we're going straight up into the attic, because northern and southern homes treat that space completely differently too. And getting it wrong quietly costs you on every energy bill. Subscribe so you don't miss it.